If you're
Okay.
stuck to it.
Okay, I think everybody has one. All right, remember, a couple things. Coaching is a process, right? It's a process, okay? Number two, one of the greatest gifts you give in coaching is self-awareness. Self-awareness, right? That's where this process comes into play, is you're giving opportunities, whether it's little, small questions you ask, or maybe a tool and a resource that you can use to help somebody gain self-awareness, right? Who's ever in here done StrengthsFinder 2.0, right? Who in here has ever done Myers-Briggs, right? Right, I mean, Enneagrams, right? Right. A lot of these things are really effective because they give you more awareness about who you are, how you operate, things like that. And it can help a lot in your own relationships. So this Wheel of Life that you're looking at, this is just a coaching tool. Like Kathleen said earlier today, it's a very common, great coaching tool that is used in a lot of different arenas. And so it can be applied, and as you've seen when you look at it, this has kind of been applied to a student situation, right? So what, if you were walking a student through this, maybe you're working with a student, and I'm just trying to kind of provide an example of when I might use this, right? You're working with a student, and either maybe you're not necessarily getting anywhere, maybe you kind of feel like they're stuck, but the communication between the two of you isn't necessarily moving the needle down the road a little bit. Sometimes it's helpful to have a tool like this where you can say, hey, I know something that can really maybe help us out and get you going, and we can kind of work together to start moving in the right direction. And you can have them fill out something similar to this. Now sometimes it doesn't have the words in it, and it's just lines. But what you do is just say, all right, take a look at this. All right, you can look at all the different pieces of the pie. And what I want you to do, you can do two things. You can either shade it in. The more full you make it, the better you feel about that area. Or you can write a number on the end of each piece of pie, scale of 1 to 10. Right, 1, this isn't going very good. It's about as low as I can get. 10 couldn't be going better. That'd be like fully colored in. Right, and so then you can give them the opportunity to do that. You can also let them know, like, hey, if you see a category, that maybe is different than what you would put on here, that you want to put in there, you can do that, right? You can cross something out, put a different category that may apply to you. Like some students will put, they'll just see like spiritual, let's say, and they might put that in there if they don't see it in another context. And so you're using this tool, and you give them the opportunity to do that, and then you can kind of coach around it. And how I would do that is if a student filled this out for me in the office, then what I would like to do is then I would say, awesome, take a look at it. We kind of have it sitting on the table. We're looking at it together. And I will always start with the one that they colored in the most. Right? I'm always going to start with the strengths. Guess where they're going to want to start? Right. But we operate from a strength-based approach, right? Because that's where we learn. So I say, hey, let's talk about 1 or 2 of these pieces that are going really well. Just tell me about it. What's going on in that area? What's making that something that you would fill it in, right? So we process through that. And then I say, okay, tell me an area that you're not quite as satisfied with that you hope could be a little bit better. And then they say study systems. Or they say motivation, right? Okay, perfect. Let's talk about that. All right, I see that you put a 3 out of 10, right? What led you to put the 3? When you think about that area, what does that area mean to you? Because that area to them might mean something a little bit different to me. Right? So I want to understand from their perspective, what does that area mean to them? What would they associate as a 3 versus what I associate as a 3, right? Those aren't going to always necessarily match, and it's not about me, so it's about them. So I'm trying to understand why they do that. And then it's really just using some of those fundamentals from listening and powerful questions to help them take some ground in that area, right? Like we all want to do. And it's not, I want you to go from a 3 to a 10, right? Say, okay, you're at a 3. What would get you to a 4 or 5? Right? What would get you to 4 or 5? And I mean, that is so helpful. I mean, and they can usually say, 1 or 2 things or this or that. Like, awesome. When would you like to be at a 5? Like, what feels realistic to getting to a 5? Can you get to a 5 in a week, 2 weeks, what does that look like? And then the accountability piece. What can I do to help you, support you, to get you to that 5? Right? And so now we have self-identified areas that were going well, because a lot of times students come in and they don't think anything's going well. Right? They just think everything's a disaster. Or victim language, like she was speaking to earlier, right? Everything's a disaster. And it's good to slow them down and say, hey, actually, sometimes there are some things going well. And if you put a 3, then there's at least one thing going well in that area maybe. And they might say, well, I'm going to class. Love it. Love it. You are going to class? Hey, that's better than most of my students doing. Right now, you say, hey, I love it. That is great. We know going to class is essential in being successful. So you need to recognize that that's a big deal, you're going to class. They've undervalued the importance of that. So now I get to reinforce, hey, you might have put a 3, but you're going to class, and that is awesome. What else is going to be awesome to help you to make some strides? Also, remember, and kind of in another tool, sometimes like on my dry erase board, I will have them write, I say, okay, it helps sometimes for students to even think beyond their own personal situation. And what I mean by that is, say, if they say I got a 3 in study systems, I'd say, okay, I'm going to write on my dry erase board effective and ineffective. I'm going to draw a line down the middle. What do you think the students who are effective in study systems, the ones that are putting a 7 or an 8 there, what do you just think they're doing? And they can give me all sorts of bullet points. So what do you think the students who aren't as effective in that area are doing? And then they can list off those bullet points very easily. Right? But what it does is it sometimes helps them when it doesn't feel personal, like I'm just speaking to me. It can help them like, okay, I think students who are doing well in study systems, this is probably what they're doing. Because in a lot of ways, they already know a lot of things and how to be successful and effective as a student. And sometimes you can even step back from just feeling personal to even a larger question like, hey, what do you think in general? Students who do well and have high motivation, what do you think is going on there? Like, and so you can sometimes step back from it. But with this tool, this allows them to really have a positive self-reflection. All right, so what I want you all to do in your partners, because the best way to process this is to do it. All right, and I'm going to give you 2 different ways you can do this. So you can see it, and how Kathleen talked about in surviving versus thriving. You were really trying to think, okay, when I was a college student, right, this is what I was struggling with that felt like I was just barely surviving. And you can think of doing this wheel of exercise, and I want you to do it. You can put a number around each one. And you can think of it from your student's perspective, from that frame of mind. Or you can think of doing this real time, right now, in your life, and maybe picking a category or changing a category. Like I would probably change, major and career, I'd probably change that to work, right? I'd probably change study systems to family. Whatever it might be, right? You can think of doing it in real time. And filling this out in that regard, all right? So what we want you to do is either pick one of those 2, do it in real time now, or imagine it was when you're filling it out as a student. And I want you to take just a few minutes and fill it out. And all you're doing is putting a number or scale 1 to 10 around each piece of the pie if you want, or at least a few. If you don't want to do all of them, that's okay. But at least a few. So take just a couple minutes to do that. And then we'll come back and we'll walk through coaching each other on that. All right? All right, go. Okay, I think everybody's at least put a few. Like I said, no big deal if you didn't go around the whole wheel of life. If you're working with a student, I'd probably give them more time than that and let them kind of go around it. So, just by doing this exercise just like this, you're like, oh man, I haven't thought about my health and resiliency in a while. Okay, I'm going to put a 4, or whatever. It just starts on automatically drawing out maybe parts of your life that you don't necessarily spend a whole lot of time sometimes stopping to think about. It does the same thing for a student. It helps them sometimes to stop in the moment and say, you know what? Where am I with that? And that in itself is very helpful. Okay, so what I want you to do is everybody has, something filled out or an area. And I want you to just pick one of them. Whether you are taking the mindset of you when you were a student or taking the current mindset right now, which I think is actually more helpful to do that. And I would like you, and your partners, is I want you, each person's going to coach for 5 minutes. You're going to coach, and then we're going to switch. So we're going to do a 5-minute coaching session, which is really child's play, all right? We're going to do a 5-minute coaching session. And I just want you to practice the fundamentals like we talked about. What are they? Listening. You got one of them. Attention, right, part of it. Trust, connection, about questions, action, right? Just like we were kind of breaking down in little bitty pieces this morning, I just want you as the coach to try to wear a little bit of those coaching fundamental hat on and do a little 5-minute coaching session on what the other person is sharing from their real life. Can we do it? And then I'll ring the bell, and then you'll switch. Yes, question?
Do we go to our partner we worked with earlier, or do we get a new partner?
You can work with whoever you want. Yeah. Probably whoever you're sitting by is probably going to be the easiest, so we'll just do it that way. All right? So let's go there. All right, 5 minutes, and then I'll ring the bell and we'll switch. If you need a partner, anybody need a partner? Right. So I know that a lot of these could have gone on for a lot longer. Which was great. There's a lot of good body language, a lot of good listening, a lot of good conversation, and this isn't necessarily easy either when you're trying to focus on level 2 listening in a room of 60 people, right? This will test your distractions for sure and make you figure out how to realign. What'd you notice? What was the experience like? How'd it feel?
Goodness, positivity. You had all 9s and 7s.
Rough life, huh? How do you take that 7 from an 8? Gotcha.
Luckily, we have a great working relationship, and I know that about her.
Good.
I love that. You know, I mean, it's fun to work with somebody who.
It reminds you there's another way of living in life, huh? Yeah.
We noticed some connectedness between the 2 lowest.
Okay.
That they're kind of feeding off of each other. Because if you're focusing on one, you can't focus on this. If you focus on this, you can't focus on this. And they're battling each other.
Oh, yeah. So it kind of gives you self-awareness of that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great point. What are the things you noticed?
I prefer being the coacher instead of the coach.
Oh, how come?
Just uncomfortable.
Being the coach? Okay. What made it uncomfortable for you?
I've never been one to express my feelings real well.
Oh, being like coach.
So, yeah, being the one actually talking about
Okay.
what the low stuff is, so that's hard.
Yeah. And that's good to know, right? Because it's hard for students too. Right? It's just a good reminder, like this isn't easy for us sometimes, let alone a student, so great point. Other things you notice?
We actually picked something that I think we both felt on a similar level, and it's actually a lot more of a conversation than we were talking.
Good.
The coaching was really natural, it felt like. I could tell she was coaching me a little, but it didn't feel stressful, like I wasn't wearing that coaching hat when I was talking to her. I was asking her questions because I was really interested.
Good.
So it was, I think, having that close experience was really, kind of surprising when you try to frame it as a coaching thing.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it should feel, you want it to feel comfortable, right? You want it to feel natural. All of you all have done a lot of these things already. A lot of you are already really good at a lot of these fundamentals already. And you don't want it to feel like this robotic or uncomfortable way to the student because it's going to then feel that way to them. It should feel like a natural, easygoing conversation, but you are also, in a way, navigating that conversation with a coach style, if you will, right? And so it might look different, a different conversation than what you're having with, your spouse at home or with a friend, on a Thursday night when you're out. But it can still be a conversation. It's just styled in a coaching approach, in a coaching mindset. And it doesn't feel like stuck in like box to box to box. Because that's not going to work. Great point. Other things you notice?
It really works. She has an action sign up.
Okay, so we got someone leaving with some action. Raise your hand if you're leaving with an action. All right, so a few of you, just go work. Yeah, that was 5 minutes, right? So, yeah, I mean, and if you can just feel like when a student can at least feel like they're leaving with something that they came up with, or you've helped encourage them along the way to come up with, maybe you had to offer some helpful suggestions because they were stuck, and you're like, hey, well, that type of deal. But if they just feel like they're leaving with a helpful suggestion or two to take action, well, then they're better than they were when they came in. Because I guarantee you, by that, they feel less stressed. You've encouraged them in that. And they're like, okay, well, I'm going to try that. And guess what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's okay. We all learn by what? Trial and error, right? Trial and error. I mean, that's how we all got to where we are anyway. We're so sometimes concerned about trying to help the students like prevent the trial part by just giving them the opportunity of the solution for it, that we forget, no, they actually need the trial. And what makes the trial doable is because they got somebody in their corner helping encourage them through the trial until they figure out what works for them. Because what worked time management wise for your student that came in at 2:30 isn't going to maybe work for the student that came in at 3:30. And if you're trying to do it the same, well then, maybe your 2:30 student's doing great, but your 3:30 is not making any progress. We're trying to box them into the same time management style. And you got to be okay with letting them try what they think works for them. Which means a lot of times, you're going to hear what they're going to try, and you're going to think, that's not going to work. But you can't stop that process. You have to let that process play it out. Sometimes you're going to be surprised, because you're not going to think it works for them, and it's going to work. And then a lot of times, it's not going to work like you thought it wasn't going to work. But you have to let that process play itself out, because otherwise you're robbing them of the learning moment that they need. So it's really critical. So this tool is just a coaching tool that really what it does, and we say in our office, it gives visualization to a conversation. Right? And that is really helpful sometimes. Sometimes when we're talking with a student in a coaching situation, sometimes just having a visual aid is helpful. So for instance, one of the coaching tools we use in our office is the GPA calculation tool. Right? The midterm talk. Right? Oh man, they're like, oh dang it, they come in our office like in the last couple of weeks and they see that out there, we're not catching it off by surprise. We told them in the meeting before, like, hey, next time we meet, we're gonna just check in, we're gonna see where you're at, and then we're gonna make a plan to keep helping you get better. Right? We're not trying to like surprise them. So that GPA calculation tool, we're doing two things. First, we're teaching them how to calculate their GPA in college, which is sometimes different for sure than in high school. They need to know how to do it, and I am not doing it for them. There is a sheet where they're doing it for themselves. And then secondly, in the same way the Wheel of Life works, awesome. Looks like you've got an A in these two classes. Tell me about those. What's working well? Okay, now then we see this class, English isn't going quite as well as you hoped. It looks like based on where you told me you wanted to be with that class. What do you think are some things you can do over the next few weeks to really improve that situation? Boom. Coaching conversation, visual representation, seems meaningful. We got a plan, and guess what? We encourage them in that, and then we use that to say, hey, here's where you are. But as a freshman, we know with 5 weeks to go, there are a lot of points remaining in this semester. So what would happen if this grade goes from a C to a B? Let's just calculate that. And then we calculate, hey, here's a possible GPA you can still get to. You're at a 2.5 right now, and it is very feasible you can get to a 3.2. You're going to most likely fall in this range. Where do you really want to be? And then now we got a visual representation of that. We got, oh man, like I can do this. There's a sense, a lot of times, of motivation that comes from that. Or there's some really critical decisions that need to be made to say, hey, I'm not going to get better in a D or F. This would probably be a smart time for us to talk about a complete withdrawal, or not complete withdrawal, but a withdrawal from that class, right? Maybe that is a conversation that comes with them. So That's a tool. That's nothing but a tool. Same way the wheel of life is, and there's a lot of different things like that you already have in your office. I promise you. It's just a different way of using the tool maybe than what you've done with it in the past. It's looking at what do we use for time management? And in that tool, how are you using it? And maybe it's just taking that tool and reshifting how you use it to put a little bit of a coaching lens on it.